So my last Jean Rollin video was about 3 years ago, and I kind of feel bad because he's one of my favorite directors. And since then, we've kind of had a Jean Rollin resurgence. Some of his films got incredible 4K Blu-ray releases. Arrow produced a documentary about the man, which I've covered in one of my Fantasia videos, I think last year, link in the description. And on my end, I've upgraded camera equipment, I've upgraded my microphone, and I've lost weight, but I'm still as mentally ill as I was back then. But without further ado, let's get into movie number 1, which is of course, Fascination. Which is one of the movies that got an incredible release through Indicator, yet I'm still here with my Redemption DVD from 2008. It's full screen, by the way. So Fascination is from 1979, and it's one of Rollin's movies that I tend to recommend to people who are curious about his work. Since it's from 79, it's kind of a blend of his early 70s movies, which were more experimental and more typical fantastique, and more modern 80s Rollin, which was more palatable for wider audiences. The film is about this criminal who is having a dispute with another criminal gang about a heist they just committed. They both want the money. However, our main criminal, who I'll call better looking Gérard Depardieu, takes a hostage and runs away from the gang. Of course, they go after him, but later on, he just lets his hostage loose. After she tries to seduce him by showing him her breasts, which is a common theme in this film, he runs away to a castle. A castle that seems empty, however, there are two people in there. Elizabeth and Eva, played by the beautiful and talented Brigitte Lahaie, who we'll see more of later in this video. And the characters meeting leads me to my first point as to why I adore this film so much. I just love the contrast between the criminal character and the two ladies. The criminal character just feels like a regular person, but the two ladies feel like Jean Rollin characters. And it's when you put them together that you really see Rollin's brilliance. They talk in a very Rollin way, which puts you as the viewer into the criminal's shoes. And the character decides to take advantage of the situation of being alone with two beautiful women who are clearly kind of into him. But as many things in life, it might be too good to be true. Brigitte Lahaie's character seduces him and they have a naughty time, which causes Elizabeth to take the gun away from the criminal. And all of that seduction is a ploy to keep the criminal in the castle for as long as possible, because the ladies have a girls' night planned that night. Meanwhile, the group of criminals get to the castle and Brigitte Lahaie comes out. She has the money and she offers the money to the criminals, to which they accept, but they need to bring her into the barn to count the money to make sure that every little penny is accounted for, which they do. And since the leader of the gang is not a great person, he wants to have intercourse with Brigitte Lahaie. She obliges, but it's all a ploy to murder everybody, which leads to one of the most iconic scenes of this film, and probably the scene that I think of when I talk about Rollin's filmography: Brigitte Lahaie running with a scythe in a long black cape. It's on the cover of this DVD, it's on the cover of the Redemption Blu-ray, and it's on the cover of the Indicator 4K that came out recently. It's truly the image that goes best with this film. After Brigitte is done her rampage, we go back to the castle, and Elizabeth is trying to warn the criminal. She's kind of fallen in love with him. Again, all of this is told through poetic dialogue, while our main character is just like, I guess I could stay here for a while. Then we finally get to meet the other ladies, cause they're here for the girls' night. Hélène is clearly the ringleader and she meets the criminal, which leads to my favorite quote of this film. Hopefully I remember to put the subtitles on whenever I record my film.
Méfiez-vous, la mort prend parfois le visage de la séduction.
The group has their fun. The criminal basically wins 7 Minutes in Heaven with Hélène, and they go to a room separate from the other ladies. The other ladies take advantage of the free time to go dress up in their gowns, which again is this image that is very typical of Rollin. You have these beautiful women who are naked under their nightgowns, and all of that to start the ceremony. The criminal discovers one of the bodies and he's like, yo, I don't fuck with y'all, I'm leaving. To which all of our ladies are like, yeah, go ahead, ahead, walk out that door. And he does. He runs to the stable, but Brigitte Lahaie is there waiting for him. And that's pretty much all I want to say about Fascination without spoiling it. I know, usually I tell you everything, but this is truly one of my favorite films from Rollin, and I think you need to see it. And it's probably his most famous, so if you're familiar with Rollin, you've probably seen it already, so you don't need me to explain everything. I absolutely adore the atmosphere. The cinematography is beautiful, the music is great, the sets just spectacular. Kind of what you expect from Rollin in this era. Our leads are so strong, and Brigitte Lahaie has this hypnotic kind of quality where whenever she's on screen, you just need to look at her and admire just her natural beauty and just her great talent, and you totally understand the characters who are getting seduced by her, especially because she might be a cannibalistic vampire bitch, which would be a great name for an all-female punk band. Also, what I appreciate from this film is Rollin's usage of daylight. Usually, I imagine Rollin's atmosphere during the night, but he does a great job at replicating that in the daytime. Franck Camé, who plays Elizabeth, does a great job at standing next to Brigitte Lahaie. As I've mentioned, it's really easy for Brigitte Lahaie to steal all the attention, but she does an amazing job at acting next to her and with her. Their friendship and maybe relationship is really strong, and you believe their love story. Elizabeth is kind of jealous whenever Eva tries to seduce a man, and you kind of get where she's coming from. It's so beautiful that this love story is so well executed in a genre that's often kind of ignored for being exploitative. Which is why I adore European low-budget horror from this era, because they had the balls to, you know, do whatever they wanted. Moving on to the next movie. If this is one of my favorites, the next one is also one of my favorites. It's Night of the Hunted. So it's been a week since I shot the last segment, and ever since then, I got a mouth infection, which means that talking hurts, so I'll make this short. Anyways, I was intending on making this short because I'm talking about Rollin's most underrated film and one of my favorites. That is of course Night of the Hunted, aka La Nuit des Traquées, which came out in 1980. This was during a weird period for Jean Rollin as he was working in adult cinema at the time, and when he got an offer to make a new one, he asked the producer if he could just make a straight up horror film. The deal was the budget was gonna be the same, and of course the shooting schedule would also be the same. So Rollin whipped up a script in one night, which is absolutely mind-boggling. I'm willing to bet that this is the best film that was ever written in one night, but I don't think there's a lot of competition there. Usually people like to take their time with screenwriting, but Jean Rollin was like, hey, I gotta make this work. Whenever he got done with the script, he called some friends of his, mostly working in adult films in France at the time, and he shot this movie in a couple of days. Now, what I like about this film is that it's completely unique for Rollin. This strays away from his work in the Fantastique to replace it with more of a body horror. In fact, this reminds me a lot of David Cronenberg's Shivers. And the atmosphere and the way it was shot also reminds me a lot of Messiah of Evil, which is a good thing, because Shivers and Messiah of Evil are both some of my favorite films of all time. I'll go through the story real quick. There's a man who sees a lady walking in the street during the night as he's driving. That woman is Elizabeth, played by Brigitte Lahaie, who you should be familiar with at this point, and she seems to be very confused. She seems to have a kind of amnesia. She doesn't remember who she is, doesn't remember who she's with. Now she's alone, but there's somebody else with her. We'll discover that later. And of course, she doesn't know what she's doing there. The man just wants to help her, so he brings her into his car, and she doesn't know where she wants to go. So he brings her wherever he was going, which was Paris. Whenever he leaves, we see another naked lady, this time with long red hair, and she seems as lost and confused as Brigitte Lahaie's character. Couple hours later, Elizabeth is still confused. She even forgets who the guy is and why she's in his car. He drops drops her off, but then as soon as she gets out of the vehicle, she forgets where she lives, why she's there, so she asks the guy to bring her to his apartment. There they have intercourse. What did you expect? This was meant to be an adult film, so there's a lot of TNA. And a lot of bush. Jesus Christ, is there a lot of bush?
Non. Je dois rester ici.
And whenever they're done, well, the guy, whose name is Robert, by the way, he's kind of an important character, says he has to go to work. So he leaves Elizabeth by herself, which doesn't seem to be a good idea, you know, because she forgets everything after 5 minutes. And whenever he leaves, somebody enters the apartment, and that is Dr. Francis. Not related to me, trust me. With his assistant, Solange. Not related to another film that I love, What Have You Done to Solange?
Mais vous êtes libre, Elisabeth.
And they want to bring her back. But where? In the Black Tower, and that's where most of the film happens. Kind of like in Shiver's apartment building, the Black Tower becomes the setting for a majority of the rest of the film. There we see a bunch of people with the same mental problems as Elizabeth, and that's where we meet all of her characters. She's rooming with somebody else who has the same issues with her memory, but she also cannot use her hands. Already it's really ominous. It feels like a mental hospital mixed with a prison. There are supposedly guards at the first and second story, and the patients are put on the 30th story just in case something happens. And the rest of the film is Elizabeth trying to escape from this prison. On her way there, she meets Veronique, which is the girl she was running with naked at the beginning, and a part of the mental issue is that it also causes violence. So when the shit hits the fan, the shit hits the fan. And that's where we get those kinds of Shivers-esque scenes where the people go insane and start killing each other. In between that, we get Elizabeth and Veronique escaping, and they find a gun, and we get to see some action scenes, which again is kind of a theme in Rollin's film. He really likes shootouts, but it's always interesting and they're always well done. Eventually, Robert comes back in the picture, and that's where I'll end my synopsis, because I implore you people, if you like Jean Rollin and haven't seen this one, please do. It is one of his best, especially when you consider that this was shot in a couple of days and written in one night. Not even my biggest issue with the film, but I feel like a lot of people would maybe not appreciate how slow moving this film is. It really likes to linger on shots. The dialogue is this weird kind of poetic Rollin-esque dialogue, which if you're put off by that, I don't think you'd like any of the films I'm talking about tonight, but hey, if you want to give him a shot, I recommend it. And of course, the atmosphere is thick and it just bleeds atmosphere. A lot of the movie is shot at night and it's really beautiful. The characters are very dramatic, but you just feel for them and you really learn to love Brigitte Lahaie's character. You want her to succeed, but at the same time you know that whatever illness she has is not getting better. You sympathize with the patients and you just want them to get out of there safely. And as this Redemption DVD points out, the final scene is heartbreaking. It's honestly one of the most powerful scenes in a Jean Rollin film I've seen yet. The first time I watched this, I almost cried. And that's something, because I'm emotionally dead. Is this one as easy to recommend as Fascination? I don't think so. Fascination is the kind of Rollin movie that you can recommend for a first-time Rollin viewer. However, Night of the Hunted is more for the experienced Rollin fan, because this is one of his most obscure but also one of the most Rollin-esque. As I've mentioned, the dialogue is almost all poetic, the shots are really slow moving, the film is slow moving, but if you're a fan of that, you won't regret this atmospheric masterpiece of French cinema. Welcome back to a different point of view of the spooky Celluloid official dungeon. And why am I here? Because it's Monday morning, I gotta get this video out for my patrons. So by the way, shout out my patrons. The Grapes of Death is today's final Jean Rollin movie on this Jean Rollin highlight, and this is another one that I absolutely adore. And this is another one that is easier to recommend, because this is Jean Rollin attempting to do a a more commercial type of horror film. And what's more commercial for French people than a horror movie about a vineyard with poison grapes that turn the villagers into insane, crazed maniacs? This film does an incredible job at showing isolation. From the start, our characters, which one of them, our main character, is named Elizabeth. Jean Rollin really liked that name, I guess. And Elizabeth is on a train with her friend, and they're alone because they're going on vacation in October. Makes total sense. And then they stop, and at the stop, somebody else comes onto the train while Elizabeth's friend is brushing her teeth. Sadly for her, however, the creepy guy who just walked on the train is an infected, kind of zombie guy who murders Elizabeth's friend. When he attempts to kill Elizabeth, she runs out of there quickly, as soon as she can, and then we follow her by her lonesome, seeing what is happening to the town around her. And once again, the feeling of isolation, the atmosphere, and the vibes are impeccable in this film. Adding to that, the attempts at making this commercial, which translated in this being a very gory film. The effects are really surprising, especially considering how low the budget was for this film. There's a decapitation scene that is really impressive, and the zombie/infected makeup is actually really well done. Elizabeth walks around and we get beautiful scenery shots of France, and then she meets a blind girl. The blind girl is gonna bring her to the village, I think, or the other way around, because she got lost after, I think, getting scared, and then when they come into the village, Elizabeth doesn't want to tell the blind girl that pretty much everyone around her is dead and the village is on fire. But you know, the blind girl is just blind, she's not stupid, so she kind of understands what's going on. She runs away from Elizabeth only to be killed by the entire village. Anyways, eventually she meets Brigitte Lahaye, who's also in this, and she's also great in this, and she plays this kind of leader of the zombies. And there's this beautiful scene where she has this white robe and 2 Doberman dogs, and it's amazing. But Brigitte Lahaye is not what she seems to be, and she's in fact one of the zombies, so she tries to attack Elizabeth, but once again Elizabeth runs away, and she is saved by 2 people who are construction workers who have guns? Well, 1 gun and a van. They rescue Elizabeth from being murdered, and then the film slowly turns into them discovering what is going on at the vineyard and why people are just going crazy. Doesn't take long for them to discover or to figure out that it might be the wine. In one of the scenes that kind of made me laugh, where the 2 guys are talking about how they like beer and not wine, which might explain why they're fine. And actually, that's why they're fine. If you don't drink the wine, you're good. So just like Fascination, this is another film I'd recommend to the newbie Jean Rollin fan. In fact, this is the first Jean Rollin movie I bought back in like 2015, I think, on Facebook, on a horror Facebook group, and ever since then I've loved Jean Rollin's work. It's still super atmospheric, but I'd actually call this one really creepy too. Plus, there's gore, so that's good for any gorehounds, and finally, it's just a really good movie. It is very influenced by the American independent movement at the time. It feels like a 70s movie, and it kind of feels like a George Romero early film. I highly recommend The Grapes of Death, and I really recommend every movie I've talked about in this video. This was probably 3 of my favorite Jean Rollin films, and there are still more that I haven't seen, so hey, we might have a part 3 of this series in the future.